Thanks everybody for being here. If you're watching the recording, we've only got 30 minutes, so I want to really get to this content because it's really useful stuff and it's really valuable stuff because I'm a big believer in the power of talent strategy. I'm a big believer that it can help you achieve more without having to spend any more. It's a way of using what you already have to achieve a lot more. And I'm hoping that by minute 30, you're going to have the tools you need to say, okay, I understand the value of it. And I know how to get my leadership and bosses excited about it too, because it will serve you, it will serve them, it'll serve your whole company. Now, here's the thing. When I talk talent strategy, you got to ask the question, what's your talent strategy? But I've heard lots of different talent leaders talk about, yeah, we've got a great talent strategy. And I ask them what it is. And they say things like, oh, yeah, we're just going to post our jobs everywhere. We're going to be omnipresent, or we've got an amazing referral bonus system, or we've got this amazing tech that makes it very easy to do referrals or to whatever, lots of different tech tools. They may talk about their perks. They may talk about how they're leveraging the best agencies to do RPO. Maybe they're talking about how much their awards are doing, how good, all the value their awards are bringing, that's their strategy. Or my personal favorite, their strategy is to be, say it with me now, folks, an employer of choice, whatever that means. And that is a problem because the truth is strategies are not plans. Strategies are not goals. Strategies are not hope. That's the thing. You look at some of those strategies and you go, oh, it's a referral bonus. That's a plan. Or we're going to be an employer of choice. No, that's a goal. These are not strategies. And I'm going to reinforce that this idea of everybody thinking they have a strategy and they don't really have a strong strategy, or they don't really have an actual strategy, is really common across all of business. Harvard Business Review says the number one challenge with talent strategy, or with strategy in general, business strategy in general, is that companies think they have one when they actually don't, that their strategies aren't actually strategies. And that's what I'm hoping to fix today. So I'm James Ellis. Most of you know me. I assume you found me through my newsletter or through my LinkedIn. So hopefully you have a sense of who I am. So, hey, how you doing? Thrilled you could be here. Thrilled you're watching the video. And I build employer brands for companies who really just can't afford to mess around anymore, who can't afford to wait months, who can't afford to spend a whole pile of money for a deck that sounds like every other company. I'm here to help you build better, stronger brands. And that includes companies that are smaller than you think might be able to afford an employer brand. Now, I care about talent strategy because talent strategy is the foundation on which a strong, valuable, effective brand is built. And when my experience, when the companies have a decent talent strategy, the brand works way, way better. It's more effective. It's more valuable. And so I kind of care about that stuff. And hopefully in the next 25 minutes, you will too. So I have to start with this question. What's your hiring advantage? This isn't an abstract question because for whatever reason, and we could go all day long on whys and wherefores and what's going on, recruiting tends to be put in a box, right? Everybody knows how to recruit better than you do, recruiters, right? At least it feels that way. Trust me, they're thinking that too. Everybody knows how to do it. They know you got to post to LinkedIn. They know you got to post to Indeed. They know you got to use ZipRecruiter because their podcast told them to. They know you got to have a career site. They know all this stuff that you got to do. And what they're doing is telling you there is a standard way to recruit. Do it. The problem with that idea of there is a standard way to recruit, so we should all do it, is that no one gets an advantage. Everybody is the same. Everybody's using the same tools in the same way, and they're not getting any advantage. And ultimately, we want an advantage. Advantage is valuable. Advantage allows us to achieve more. But we don't ever talk about the idea of how do we get a recruiting advantage in our space. And that's unfortunate. And that's really where we're going to spend the next couple of minutes. Because the truth is, when all is said and done, your talent strategy is just using your advantage. What makes you you? Why are you doing it? Instead of just having to work really hard, how do you leverage the thing that makes you you to achieve more? That's really all we're trying to talk about here. Don't think that we're going to get end up with a dissertation on your strategy, or that your strategy has to be a 100 slide deck. Your strategy is simply, what's your advantage? Now, you might wonder, well, hold on, what do you mean by advantage? Because there's a lot of different ways you could have an advantage. If I'm a swimmer, a professional swimmer, and everybody's in a little Speedo and I've got a head to toe outfit that streamlines me, I might have a technical advantage. Or my arms might be 2 inches longer than everybody else, and I might have a physical advantage. Or I might have figured out that the person who, fires the starting pistol always fires it exactly 2 seconds after the last beep, and I have some kind of a knowledge advantage. When we talk about advantage, what we're really talking about is difference, right? You can't be the same as everybody else and have an advantage. That's not what an advantage is. You have to figure out your difference. And really, to get specific about it, what is your difference or what will you do differently? Those are two different things, but they're really in the same idea. You don't have to be a radically different company to have a strategy, but you can figure out what you're willing to do that others won't or others can't. And that's your strategy. That's how you gain your advantage. Because the truth is, when you do the work kind of like everybody else, you're in a race. You're in a swimming race, you're in a foot race, you're in an arms race. It doesn't matter. You're just in a race. And that race kind of assumes that everybody is pretty much the same. You never see a race where you find, where you say, okay, there's Usain Bolt and there's an 80-year-old grandma. You don't do that. Everybody is kind of at a set stage. When you look at races, everybody is, in Olympics, they're all men or they're all women, right? And they're all kind of young. There's no kind of seniors. There's a whole different race for seniors. There's a whole different race for kids. They break them down so that everybody is kind of the same. That's a race. You don't want that. You have to work really, really, really hard just to achieve some minor win. You've seen these races. The people are, eking out wins. They're winning by milliseconds and hundredths of a second. That's not winning. That's barely making it through. What we need to be doing is thinking about how to figure out what makes us different or what can we use that's different to gain an advantage so that we can stop racing like everybody else and do our own race. Right? I want you to be the Katie Ledecky of swimming, where you are 2 and 3 laps ahead of everybody else, right? Where it's a boring race because when you're halfway through, you're like, everybody knows how this is going to end. How do you leverage your advantage to work? Now, when we're talking about strategy, most people talk about military stories. They talk about the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Greeks figured out that in order to battle 100,000 Persians, well, if they just kind of went head to head, they get crushed. What they did is they said, let's have the fight in a mountain pass where it's a very narrow space where their numbers advantage minimized. It's completely eliminated. That we are better fighters, so we'll put ourselves in a spot where we're not fighting 1,000 people at a time, we're fighting one person at a time. That way we'll win. Or we could talk about the Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal, you've heard of Hannibal, he said, well, we're going to get crushed by this Roman army that's twice the size of us on their territory, and they're better rested than we are. We're going to get crushed. So instead of saying, let's go head to head and fight it out, in which case it's a foregone conclusion, instead we're going to say, if they're going to put their best people up front, why can't we put our worst people up front? And then when they attack us, we'll pull back. And that way, when they move forward, our best people will wrap around and kill them from the back, from the rear and the sides. What they said was, we're willing to do something different, not the obvious, not the usual, not the best practices, as you were, to achieve our goal. What are we willing to do that others won't? Now, warfare stories are boring. Let's talk about business stories. This is classic business strategy. And these are some of the best known examples of business strategy in the world. I'm just going to kind of sketch them out so you understand what I'm talking about. We won't go into the full dissertation here. You all know Southwest. It is a huge airline. And 25 years ago, it was a nothing airline. Nobody knew who it was. It was tiny. It was rinky-dink. It was regional. And at the time, every airline, your Uniteds, your Americans, your Deltas, what have you, they all said, well, the money is in the business traveler. They're the ones who are paying full fare. They're buying first class upgrades. They got business travel. They are the money, baby. So let's go all attack the money. And they all focused on the same audience. And so they all made lounges, and they all came up with loyalty programs and status programs and first class seating. And they gave them the access, to better seats. And they all said, oh, we better give them really good food, and we better give them the best of everything so we can attract these really valuable clients to our airlines. Now, when you have all the airlines fighting over that part of the market, Southwest said, well, if we try to fight the same way they are, if we try to focus on that audience, we're going to get crushed. We're too small. We're too rinky-dink compared to Delta and United and American. There's no way. So if they're all going to focus on that audience, the business traveler audience, why don't we focus over here to people who aren't served by that? We can say, instead of being, let's be the most useful, the nicest airlines for business traveler, we're going to be the airline for everybody else, people who aren't traveling for business. So people who aren't going to New York City, because business people go to New York City and they go to Chicago and they go to LA, right? They go to the big cities. Well, if you're not traveling for business, maybe you want to go to Tulsa. Maybe you want to go to Sacramento. Maybe you want to go to other cities. Maybe if you're flying to a Chicago, you want to fly into Midway, which is the smaller airport instead of the big O'Hare. Maybe there's a whole other audience to be served. And that's what Southwest did. They said, instead of focusing on business travelers, we're going to focus on these other travelers, the low cost travelers. Now, what does that mean? By focusing that means they're spending less on airports, because every time a plane docks in an airport, they got to pay money, and they pay a lot less at Midway than they do at O'Hare. So they're saving money by going to Midway. They're saving money by flying to Sacramento instead of LA. They're saving money by having the same plane across the board. It makes the repair costs way lower. They're going to save money by not serving food. They're going to save money by not having to have a reservation system where you have to pick your seat. They're going to save money every way they can. What they're doing is saying, we're not competing against Delta, United, and American. We're competing against Greyhound. We have to be cheap. And every time they decided that was their strategy, that strategy told them what to do. Hey, make these choices. Choose the thing that lowers cost. Choose the thing that serves that audience. And they could do things that Delta, United, and American simply never could. Because if Delta wanted to reach those audiences, it would have to give up the lounges. It would have to give up the food. It would have to completely change the way it does things. And that they can't do that. Here's another example, Tesla. And we can ignore, please, for just a few moments, who owns that company, runs that company right now. But Tesla, when it started, it was looking at a space that said electric cars are great because they're cheap, right? The cost to drive a mile was way cheaper in an electric car because electricity is way cheaper than gasoline. And so everybody thought, electric cars are about fuel efficiency. It's about economy. It's for people who are cost conscious. So consequently, they made cheap electric cars. The Prius was designed to be an electric car for everybody, but it was like two bicycles glued together with a plastic chassis. Like, it was designed to be lightweight because they said the people who like electric cars like cost efficiency. They're cost conscious. They want cheap. So they made cheap cars. Tesla said, well, hold on. The price to build an electric motor and all those batteries is still really high, right? The per mile cost is low, but we still haven't perfected all this stuff that goes into it. It's really expensive to build a good car electrically, right? So why don't we just put a Lotus body on it, make it sexy as all get out, and sell it as a supercar? And that way we can sell it to people who want to spend money, who the idea of an electric car sounds cool, make a lot of money, and take all that money and all the learnings and efficiencies we do by building that car and selling it to 1,000 people. And now we're going to make a sedan. And now we're going to compete not against the Prius, but against the BMW. And we get a lot of people say, ooh, that's a really nice kind of BMW comparison. And suddenly they were the only electric model in that car, in that space. And they made so much money and they learned so much, they could build a gigafactory and they could make something that competes with a Toyota. Right? He wrote this down, by the way, in a document called Tesla's Super Secret Strategy. You can Google it. You can read it. It's a great document saying this is how we're going to leverage our difference. Google says, everybody knows you can't give away software. Microsoft made a whole business that you can't give away software, but that's what it did. It gave away Chrome. It gave away Android. It gave away Google Gmail. It gave away all this stuff. Why did it give away? Because the more it gave away, the more it learned about its users so they could sell more ads. They said, Microsoft will never give its software away, so we can do something different because it's how it serves us. Now, thinking beyond business strategy, we need to connect it to talent strategy. And we're going to talk about the connection there in a second, but let's come up with some examples, because the truth is, when I ask people what's their talent strategy and they kind of hem and they haw and they give vague answers, I think the reason they do that is because, well, no one's actually shown anybody what a talent strategy looks like. Right? Anybody gone to talent strategy school? Anybody taken a talent strategy class? Not really, right? This is not something that is commonly known. So what I want to do is give you 3 examples of actual talent strategies, okay? So, and there are 3 very different models. So ready? Hang on. Netflix. Now, you've all read the Netflix culture deck, and everybody knows it's an amazing culture deck. And there's a lot of reasons to read it, and a lot of reasons to continue to read it. It's still incredibly valuable 15, 16, 17 years later. But it's talent strategy baked right in. Because aside from all the other stuff it talks about, it really says we believe that the whole streaming market is very valuable and it's going to change fast and it's going to require the best people. And if we can figure out a way to afford the very best people, we can stay on the cusp of what's cutting edge and what's happening, and we can really have a huge success. And that huge success is going to be incredibly lucrative. So we don't mind spending some money because we know the outcome is going to be a huge return on that investment. And so consequently, they paid at the top of the market. They paid people way more than they would have gotten anyplace else. But the expectation was the second they could find someone better to fill that slot, like a football team or a basketball team, they let you go with a severance package. And they said, we're upgrading our room, or upgrading that slot. If we can find a better quarterback, we'll get rid of this quarterback and bring that new quarterback in. No hard feelings. That's just the game. Netflix could do a strategy like that because its business strategy was, we believe this space is incredibly lucrative, but it will require the best people to make that happen. So what's our talent strategy? We're going to pay people a lot of money to hire only the very, 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 very best in every spot, and we'll be able to get rid of them and upgrade as we need. Compare that to Enterprise Holdings, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is how you might know them. They recruit in a very different way. They don't hire people, they hire entry-level people. 90 to 95% of their people are hired at the entry-level role, right? The people vacuuming cars and checking you in and, answering the phone and manning the desk and doing the paperwork. They're doing the job. They're doing the hard work. Their strategy is, when everybody understands what a customer goes through, when everybody understands how to serve a customer, we have a better company. We can work better together. So the talent strategy is everybody's got to come in from the ground floor, so to speak. So recruiting says, well, shoot, we don't really need to spend a lot of money on big, expensive platforms for higher level people. We're only talking to primarily people between the ages of 18 and 25. So I guess the ladders is not a good strategy, not a good tactic based on that strategy. This is how strategy dictates what you choose. It's an incredibly valuable approach and allows them to focus. Like Enterprise has fewer recruiters per business, employee than many companies because they're so focused. They only primarily talk to entry-level people, which means when they do, they have a strong message because they know exactly who they're talking about. They dominate the conversation because they pay more attention to entry-level market than anybody else, because everybody else is paying attention to entry-level and second level and high level and high level salaried and management and whatever. They're paying attention to lots of things. Enterprise says, we're just focusing on entry level. Now compare that to Costco, who says, we're going to make Costco such a place to work that no one may ever want to leave. We're going to give them really good salaries. We're going to give them like surprising healthcare compared to the similar kind of jobs in other places. We're going to have a comfortable place to work. We're going to treat each other with respect. They're going to feel like this is a place where they would never want to leave. So what does that mean? Well, it means that they don't need many recruiters because they don't need to hire many people. They're not losing people 20, 30, 40% every year like a lot of companies do. People stay for an insanely long time. They have a very low loss rate. And they don't need as many recruiters because the people who do work there talk about how great it is to work there. They don't need recruiters. They just need referrals. Right? You want to build a new location and you need 500 people to staff it. You go to your existing staff and say, who's great? That is a talent strategy. They're not focused on job boards. They're not focused on career sites. They're focused on using their internal people to leverage and build their staff. Okay, moving forward. Here's the amazing thing about strategy. A strategy, when you write it down, creates structure. It creates a kind of scaffolding that allows you to do what others won't or can't. Because when you decide your strategy is, I don't know, I'm making something up at random, we're not going to use LinkedIn. And your hiring manager gets wind of that and they say, wait, you can't hire and recruit without LinkedIn. Why aren't you using LinkedIn? And it's going to be a fight between the hiring manager and you. And I hate to tell you, you are going to lose because hiring manager is better connected to the business. But if you have a strategy that says, because we're only focusing on, for example, entry-level people are not very active on LinkedIn. That's not where they're doing their most, their work. We can ignore LinkedIn. Suddenly you have a rationale for why you're making these choices. And that rationale should connect to the larger business strategy, the larger corporate strategy. And this has so many knock-on effects that are so good for you. One, it shows your company that you're just not doing the job. You have a thought process, you have a strategy, you have a perspective, you have a reason for doing what you're doing. You're all going to get pushback every single day from hiring managers who think they know how to recruit better than you do, and that's crazy, but here we are. And they're going to tell you what you should be doing. Your strategy says, we've thought about all that. This is what we're focusing on, and this is how we're going to do it. You sound so much smarter than just, okay, we'll do whatever, or we'll just go ahead and spend more money on ads, or running around like a chicken, like without a head, which, let's be fair, most days it feels like that's what you're doing, right? It's a rough job. There's a reason why recruiters burn out. At the same time, you can say how this strategy, your strategy, connects to the company strategy. In the same way that enterprise is about, look, if we're only going to bring people up because people who understand how the business works are going to help serve the business, recruiting strategy, the talent strategy is great. I now know what to focus on. And by connecting that dot, you are now driving more value. You're not just bringing in people, you're serving the corporate strategy. You have more value within the company. So we don't have time to show you how to build an entire strategy step by step, but here are the three big ideas. First, start with what is your company strategy. And I'm going to show you how to test a strategy. And you may find that when you talk to your COO and your CFO and you ask, what's our company strategy? And they give you all sorts of answers, they may not have a strong sense of what the strategy actually is. And that's a separate conversation, but I just want to point that out. It may be something that happens. Step two, what talent is required to make that strategy real? If their strategy is all about, we're only going to hire the best and brightest, they can't also say, and we're going to pay them less than the market will give you. What? Some of you are going, oh God, I've heard that story. I know, we've all heard that story. But if the strategy is X, what talent is required to serve that strategy? And then what will you do differently to make that strategy happen? Because look, you have finite resources, you have finite available tools and skills and value, you have finite whatever. Where are you going to focus it? What are you going to do differently to achieve it? Now, when you kind of sketch out your strategy, and you should do this at home and you should figure it out, and you should spend the time doing it, because doing it right takes a little bit of time. It's not something you do in a 30-minute webinar. I didn't promise everybody you'd get a strategy. I'd promise you that you'd understand strategy. But when you write one down and you're like, I think this is my strategy, here are some tests to make sure you've got it right. Because as I said, Harvard Business Review says the biggest problem with strategy is that people don't actually have a strategy. They think they do, but they don't. So here are the three tests. First, can anybody do it? If you say we're going to, our strategy is to use ZipRecruiter, that's fine, but everybody can do that. If your strategy is to buy a tech tool, that's great. But the second they sell you that tech tool, that company is going to sell it to 1,000 other people. If it's not creating an advantage, if it's something that anybody can do, it's probably not a strong strategy. So you got to be wary of that. Two, can you flip it? And this is serving that idea of we're going to be an employer of choice, or we're going to be the best employer, or whatever that is, that aspiration of how great we're going to be. If you can reverse it, flip it upside down, is the opposite true? Can you have a talent strategy that says we are going to not be an employer of choice? No, you can't. That doesn't make any sense. We're going to be an employer of not choice. That makes no sense. If you flip it and it doesn't make any sense, it's not a strategy. It's an aspiration. It's a hope. It's a goal. And finally, and this is the most important one, are there trade-offs? When you look at all the strategies I mentioned, when they chose, they were saying, we're going to talk to this audience and we're going to ignore everybody over here. Enterprise said, we're going to talk to entry level and we're going to ignore everybody else. If there are no trade-offs, that's not a strategy. Every strategy has trade-offs, and it's clear when you look for them what they are. And that's a great indication that you're on the right track. You're not here to serve everybody. You simply can't. You have to focus on who are you talking to that's different? How are you talking to them in a way that's different? What are you offering them that's different? What is the thing that gives you the advantage? Because ultimately what we're trying to do is take your, difference, clarify it, and turn it into your advantage. That is what we're trying to do here. That's what I'm asking you to think about. So if you're ready to kind of leverage that advantage, set up some time with me. I'd love to talk to you about thinking about your talent strategy, your employer brand, and how it connects, how it can work, how it can serve you and your company. I'm going to leave that QR code up for a while, and I'm checking the clock. Nailed it on time. Thanks so much for being here. I know it sounded like there were a couple of issues, people coming in, but I'm glad people did make it into the studio, as it were. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to send the recording out to everybody in an hour or two, or whenever it takes to kind of process this. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this was useful. I hope you learned something. And more importantly, I hope you can see how you can tell this story to your boss, because that is where talent strategy and employer brand is going to do its best work for you. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for listening. I'm James Ellis. I'll talk to you soon.